It's nice to see you again, Will. This is our 5th session together. I'm going to be honest with you, we haven't made any progress. Your sabbatical is almost up, and when Disney finds out you haven't done jack squat, they're going to fire you. I've tried to help you, but you're not helping me. Look, I know Jeremy's been dead for 6 months, but you gotta move on. Your career's on the line. The kids are on the line. Think about all the kids who need to learn about respiration this week. They're gonna have a test. And AP Biology's hard. You're failing them. And you're failing me. I got that degree to help people. And you're not letting me help you help me.
Hey Dad, can you help me with a science question?
Thomas, can't you see I'm with a client right now? I'm sorry, Will. He's adopted. Please go.
So what do you know about cellular respiration?
First of all, I don't have a legal obligation to talk to you. Second of all, I have a degree in hard mind science, not in science. Okay? Leave. Will, did you just say something? Will! 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 William Lehan.
The science guy.
William Lehan, the science guy.
Will.
William Lehan.
Science.
William Lehan.
Inertia is a property of matter.
Will Nye, the science key.
Will. William Lehan.
The science guy.
So what can you tell me about cellular respiration?
Well, as we speak, respiration is occurring in every living cell. However, for eukaryotes, it happens in a slightly different way than the other domains. Let's zoom into the cell of a eukaryote. Here we can see the different organelles of the cell. Most of the respiration process occurs in the mitochondria of cells. However, our first stop is the cytosol.
Whoa, you're getting ahead of yourself. What does respiration use and what does it seek to produce?
I'm glad you asked before we continued. Here we can see the equation for respiration. 1 glucose molecule and 6 oxygen molecules are used to produce 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and water. Along with this reaction is the release of ATP, the molecules which power many cellular functions. Many steps are required, each releasing some ATP, until somewhere between 27 to 38 ATPs are produced. This reaction is classified as exergonic because it releases energy.
Okay, so where were we?
We left off in the cytosol. Here the first step of respiration occurs. I'm calling it the first step for sake of explanation, but really all the steps are happening at the same time, each leading into the next as the products of each step are produced. In glycolysis, 1 molecule of glucose is turned into 2 molecules of pyruvate. This will become important later. Along with pyruvate, it also creates a small amount of ATP. The enzyme hexokinase transfers a phosphate group from a molecule of ATP to glucose, turning the molecule into glucose 6-phosphate. Then, phosphoglucoisomerase turns this molecule into its structural isomer, fructose 6-phosphate. Another ATP is invested when phosphofructokinase attaches a phosphate group onto the other end of the molecule. This molecule is now called fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. The enzyme aldolase splits this larger molecule into dihydroxyacetone phosphate and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, both 3 carbon sugars which are isomers of each other. It is only glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate which goes on to the energy releasing phase. Triose-phosphated dehydrogenase oxidizes the sugar, transferring electrons to NAD+, turning it into NADH. Along with that, this energy release allows the phosphate group to be attached. This new molecule is now 3-phosphoglycerate. This phosphate group is moved into a different location by phosphoglyceromutase, and this molecule is called 2-phosphoglycerate. A nolase removes 2 hydrogens and an oxygen from this molecule, releasing a water molecule and turning it into phosphoenolpyruvate, or PEP. The final phosphate group is transferred to ADP by pyruvate kinase, producing another ATP. We end up with the molecule pyruvate.
Wait a minute. If 2 molecules of ATP were used and you just described 2 being produced, where does that small amount of ATP come from?
Now you're thinking like a scientist, Thomas. Remember when fructose 1,6-bisphosphate was split, producing isomers? Well, that other molecule can also be used because of the enzyme isomerase, which can catalyze the reversible conversion reaction between the two. Therefore, we end up netting 2 ATP.
Well, that's still nowhere close to 27 to 38.
Don't you worry, there's still lots of fun to be had. Pyruvate enters the mitochondria, an organelle often vaguely referred to as the powerhouse of the cell, through active transport. Before entering the citric acid cycle, however, a preparatory reaction takes place. Enzymes in the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex are used to catalyze these reactions. First, the carboxyl group is removed and is released as carbon dioxide. The fragment remaining is oxidized into acetate, and the electrons are transferred to NAD+, producing NADH. Finally, coenzyme A, which is a sulfur-containing compound, is attached to the acetate, forming acetyl coenzyme A, or acetyl-CoA. This molecule continues on to the citric acid cycle. Acetyl-CoA adds its acetyl group to the oxaloacetate using citric synthase. It is then converted into citrate and then isocitrate by the enzymes aconitase by removing a water and replacing it, switching the placement of certain groups. Isocitrate is oxidized by isocitrate dehydrogenase, generating an H+ molecule and CO2. Electrons are also produced, creating another NADH. Alpha-ketoglutarate is the molecule remaining. Alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase splits a CO2 molecule off and H+, resulting in an oxidation which creates another NADH. Coenzyme A, knocked off from before, rejoins this molecule, building succinyl-CoA. Succinyl-CoA synthetase uses phosphate to displace that CoA group. This energy is used to affix that phosphate to GDP, producing GTP. This GTP can be used directly or turned into ATP. Either way, we can count that as another ATP produced. Succinate is the molecule remaining. Succinate dehydrogenase transfers 2 hydrogen to FAD, making FADH2. Fumarate is left, and fumarase attaches a water molecule to create malate. Malate dehydrogenase is used to oxidize this molecule and reduce another NAD+, creating NADH along with an H+ ion. Oxaloacetate remains, starting the cycle over again. The cycle runs twice for the amount of initial products we had, so the amount of ATP produced goes up by 1, NADH3, and FADH2 by 1.
That seems like a pretty long-winded process for not that much ATP. What was the purpose of that?
Well, you see, the citric acid cycle's main purpose was not to produce a ton of ATP directly. The products NADH and FADH2 are very important as they move on to the next step, oxidative phosphorylation and chemiosmosis, which will produce lots of ATP. To start, let's take a look at the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain takes place in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. This inner membrane has many cristae or folds, much like politician Chris Christie. The purpose of this is to increase surface area. Let's take a closer look. At this level, we can see the individual protein complexes of the electron transport chain. NADH first loses its electron to complex 1. As the electron drops energy levels, it releases energy and pumps H+ ions across the inner membrane into the intermembrane space. FADH2 is oxidized in complex 2. These electrons are then moved to the mobile carrier ubiquinone. This ships the electrons to the third complex, and as they move through, more H plus protons are moved into the intermembrane. Cytochrome C accepts the electrons and transfers them to the fourth system where the chain ends. Oxygen gas accepts these electrons and produces water as a byproduct. Meanwhile, this higher concentration of H plus ions in the intermembrane space creates a high water potential. Through chemiosmosis, the protons flow back into the matrix through the ATP synthase. The movement of these protons spins the top of the ATP synthase, affixing a phosphate group onto ADP, producing ATP. Because of the amount of NADH and FADH2 previously produced, this chain runs several times. Around 26 to 28 ATP are produced through this process, netting a total of 30 to 32 ATP. This number varies depending on the condition, which is how we get the wider range described earlier. This ATP can go on to perform active cellular functions.
Wow, thanks Will and I. Now I know all about respiration.
And hopefully you, the viewer, have learned at least a thing or two about respiration.
I can't fake this. It's not legal, trust me. I would if I could. You don't think I'd get rid of my goddamn adopted kid? I swear to God. I know. It's like, is his mom hot? Not really. But if you look at me, I'm not doing so great either. How many 180-pound... Okay. Thomas, can't you see I'm with a client right now? I'm sorry, Will. He's adopted. Thank God his stepmom's hot. I mean, adopted stepmom. He's adopted, but I'm also his stepfather.